this episode of the Growth Engine podcast, I'm delighted to be speaking to Ben Rhodes, the creative force behind Phoenix Group's brand revolution. Since taking the helm as brand director nearly 3 years ago, Ben has built a team from scratch, redefined the company brand identity, and launched a sonic branding initiative, garnering a broad industry acclaim. Under Ben's direction, Phoenix Group has a redefined corporate presence and established the organization as a standard bearer of purpose-driven marketing, tackling essential societal challenges head-on. Join us as we explore this transformative journey and gain insights into how Ben is forging new paths in the financial services marketing landscape. Ben, thank you for joining us today. You're brand director at Phoenix Group, but you've had a very interesting career to get to becoming brand director at Phoenix Group. Can you give us a bit of background information about how you got to this point?
Sure. I've had a career in kind of several parts. So the first roughly decade, I actually spent agency side. Started off in the studio actually at a university, didn't know what I was going to do, and ended up doing some copywriting and design work. Realized that I wasn't very good at that, but I loved the atmosphere in the industry. So I decided that I would stay in advertising and marketing. And I took some advice, and they said, look, you've come in quite an unconventional route. If you want to really survive and do well here, you're going to need to specialize in something. Because you haven't come on a grad program or anything like that. Mainly TV ads. It's going to be quite hard to get to a big agency with no experience like that. So they said, specialize in financial services. No one wants to do it. Every agency has a really big financial services client. Be that person who can manage that account.
Right.
So I kind of, at the sort of tender age of, I don't know, 22, I went, cool, I'll give that a go. And that's exactly what I did. And I moved from a very small provincial agency up to a financial specialist agency in London, then jumped around a little bit and worked in a number of agencies, and ended up ultimately at McCann Erickson, where I spent a couple of years there, leading the JP Morgan Fleming asset management account across Europe, amongst a whole range of other sector brands as well. I ran the Microsoft account in the UK, and some work on Johnson & Johnson, a couple of franchises across Europe, for their brands, which was fabulous experience. So that was the first kind of section.
Very good advice, whoever gave you that, wasn't it? It was very kind of, and it clearly worked as a strategy.
Absolutely life-changing.
Fabulous.
Absolutely life-changing. What I would say is I really don't regret the first sort of 6 months to 9 months that I spent kind of in the production side of things. I mean, I even did a small stint at a repro house. And, I've really valued understanding a bit about how you physically make stuff, and that has been hugely valuable to me.
Yes.
Feels like it's a bit of a grounding in the kind of craft of actually what you do. Now, I'm hopeless as on the design front myself personally, but actually being in that environment was really powerful.
A previous guest on the podcast, Laura Brown from M&G, talked about the T-shaped marketer, broad generic experience across the top, but very deep sector, single sector experience. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, and I think more broadly within, having spent, roughly a decade in agencies on a variety of different types of business, I've worked with some amazing people, and I really learned the craft of communication and brand building there, kind of,
Yes.
at their feet, and actually really seeing how these people do it. And I think that's, whilst marketing is much broader than just advertising, it was the way that I got into marketing.
Yes, yeah.
And it's always been something that I can lean back on. And is, in terms of that T-shaped piece, it's very much the kind of the specialism that I came into before I kind of got into more kind of management and leadership roles.
After McCann, where did your journey take you?
Yeah, so I decided that I should go in-house, and I was approached by MasterCard to come in and rebrand what was then a payment brand, debit payment brand called Switch, which they just bought from a couple of banks, and to rebrand that to a brand called Maestro. It doesn't exist in the UK anymore, but it was MasterCard's European debit payment brand. So I jumped in-house to go and do that. I was the only debit marketer in the whole of Europe for MasterCard because everything was credit based. And that was a fabulous experience. It was a brilliant thing to do, and it was a lovely transition from being, because MasterCard was very, very kind of brand focused and very kind of advertising and activation focused. It was a real natural transition for me to kind of go into that kind of role. And after about a year of working on the debit business, I then moved across onto the credit card side of things, and ended up running the Priceless campaign and all the sponsorships in the UK, which was, absolutely fabulous.
Yes.
Absolutely fabulous.
Incredible campaign.
Yeah, but it was MasterCard was really where I kind of got my commercial chops. So I think, I mean, they had some terrific marketers there. A lot of them were kind of ex Procter and Gamble from all around the world, and because it was a truly global business, you'd have people from, I don't know, Latin America coming in to be the regional head of marketing for Europe and work very closely with the guys in the States. And that's really where, I learned how to read a P&L. I learned how to kind of follow the money and work out where we should be focusing our activity on, rather than what was easy to do.
Yeah.
And that was a huge learning for me coming out of agency, which was just really about craft, into actually how do we really make money,
Effectiveness.
yeah, and effectiveness, and how do we do that, but in a very brand centric environment. So that was phenomenal. I did that about 5 years, but I reached a point. I had two young kids and a third on the way. MasterCard was very, very kind of global, a lot of travel involved. And to progress beyond the UK, I would either have had to have taken a regional role, or gone to work in a different geography. And that just wasn't on the
Yeah.
table,
Yeah.
for me. And so I took a bit of a punt, actually. I was approached about joining Royal Mail as their head of brand and marketing, in the run up to them having their IPO. And I just thought, well, that seems like a really brilliant job. The last public service to be, to kind of, go public, and a dusty old brand. I'll go in and kind of, spread a bit of magic dust around and see what I can rustle up. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, if I'm honest with you. MasterCard was a very low head count global organization, huge budgets, and we outsourced loads to our agencies. I mean, this is like 2005 to 2010. So, I mean, digital was really still quite nascent. I mean, we had websites, but, there really wasn't, the kind of social media activation that you do these days. I mean,
No.
Facebook was around, but I mean, might have had 1 million users in the UK. It really
Yeah.
wasn't big. So it was very, very outsourced. I go to a land at Royal Mail and it's like, a team of, I don't know, 50 people or something, and a business in turnaround, not in growth. And I'd always been used to working in a high growth business with large budgets, and I'm suddenly in a turnaround environment. I'm in an environment which was very B2B as well as B2C, which I hadn't really thought about when I joined, but most of the revenue that Royal Mail makes is from businesses asking it to deliver parcels or letters, not from consumers sending things in the post. So I had to lean on a lot of what I learned in agencies. I did a lot of B2B advertising when I was in agency. So that was really interesting. And also a completely sclerotic organization, huge bureaucracy. I mean, a court of infinite appeal. You could never get anything done without speaking to about 15 different people. Really quite challenging. It wasn't about me being the cleverest person in the room. It was absolutely about how do I influence and inspire huge teams of people to go out and do the right thing, in a very commercial way. Because what I found at Royal Mail, it was when I joined, it was still a monopoly, very heavily regulated. They'd never had to sell to anyone really through marketing because everyone had to buy their products anyway. So there was very, very poor commercial understanding and commercial acumen. So I spent a lot of time there. I ended up being at Royal Mail for 10 years, in a variety of different roles. The last 3 as group marketing director. I ran all the marketing, all the brand building, and all of digital. Set up social media for them, just a million and one different things. Took redundancy in the middle of COVID. I'd done my 10 years. I thought that was enough. They were doing another big round of kind of cost cutting. I thought, right, that's it. I've had enough now. Because of the terms of my redundancy, I couldn't actually take any paid work for a period of time. So I had quite a lot of time on my hands. So I thought, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to work out what I want to do next. I'm not sure I really want to go into another role like I had at Royal Mail. It was I found I was quite tired after that. It was quite draining. I did lots of different things. I got involved with some startups through Oxford University. They had like an incubator there called the Foundry, and so I kind of did a bit of work with them. I worked with some charities just to kind of help them get through some stuff, and it was really interesting. I learned very quickly that I don't want to go into consultancy. The thing I miss the most actually is uh, people coming to me saying, how do I solve this? What do I do? And kind of managing a team. I really missed not having that kind of level of interaction, which I didn't appreciate when I was working
No.
actually. But it's only afterwards when you kind of go, oh, there's no one asking my advice for anything. That's a
Yes.
bit
Yeah.
odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also realized I wanted to get back into kind of the things that I enjoyed the most, which were much more creative. When you go up the greasy pole and you end up in a kind of a big CMO or a big group marketing director role, like I had, you spend your life in meetings, and it's quite dry, and it can be quite soul destroying if because you become further and further and further away from the actual product that
Yeah.
you're creating. And I just thought, after 10 years of doing that, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to get much more back into it. So I joined GSK very briefly. I did a contract for them, helping their global brand director set up a new function as they were splitting out their consumer division. And I helped Philip kind of appoint the agency, Wolf Owens, I think it was, to kind of do the rebrand of GSK, and it allowed me, like, the most amazing fun to kind of just get back into design, and brand strategy, to a level that I hadn't done for years, and I just realised that I really enjoyed doing that. But it was never going to be a permanent gig. It was always just to go in and help Philippa set the function up. And I started. I got approached by Phoenix about this role as brand director, and it was a very long recruitment process. I mean, about 4 months. Um, uh, but I realised that this was a role that offered me the sweet spot of what I wanted. So I decided that was definitely going to be the right thing to do. So yeah, about 2.5, nearly 3 years ago, I left GSK and went into Phoenix to set up a brand function, and transform their brand.
So when you say set up a brand function, was it literally setting up from scratch?
Well, not quite scratch, but pretty much scratch. So Phoenix has been around for a very long time, but it had been very much a kind of, I guess, in financial, how would you describe it? A backbook consolidator. So it was a business built around merger and acquisition. It bought up closed book life funds, so defined benefit schemes, effectively old pensions, that needed to be serviced, and put them onto their digital platform, and basically made sure that those members of those schemes had secure income in their retirements from great brands from yesteryear, like Abbey Life, Britannic Assurance, Pearl Assurance, various bits of Old Mutual, and I mean, big books of business of pension schemes that those companies no longer existed, but the pensions still need to be looked after. So that's what Phoenix did. So it grew inorganically. It still is very well known in the city for M&A, and it was brilliant at buying up those businesses. So it didn't grow organically. It didn't have to win customers. It bought them, and then managed them. Um, uh, but they had made a decision about probably a year before I joined. They appointed a new chief executive, a guy called Andy Briggs, who came from Aviva, to transform the business into being an open book business as well as a closed book business, on the basis that
What does that mean? Open book business was closed books.
so closed book, you're buying up these bits of business where you can't market to the customers. You just manage
Got
their
it.
annuity, or their with profits, or whatever the product was that they had the previous company. An open book business is one that wins customers, and can sell them products. So
Visible in the market.
yeah, in the market.
Mm,
And the reason why they wanted to have the open book division was because there's only so many defined benefit pension schemes that are available in market
I
at any
see.
one point in time, and it's a kind of declining market as the whole world in the UK has moved towards kind of defined contribution schemes.
I see.
So So when Andy came in, his mission was to kind of transform the business. And he made a number of acquisitions when he did that. He bought another very big closed book consolidating business called Reassure, from Swiss Re, and then he also bought the Standard Life brand and life business from Aberdeen, which is where Standard Life Aberdeen kind of had to do their rebrand to Aberdeen.
We had the two former co-CMOs that handled that rebrand. They were a second guest on this podcast.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Standard Life Aberdeen had always managed, it was a key strategic partner of Phoenix Group anyway, managed an awful lot of the funds for the books of business that we had. But Andy wanted to have a growing business. And we thought, well, rather than build a brand from scratch, let's buy the Standard Life brand. It hasn't really been invested in while it's been part of Aberdeen. Let's reinvigorate it and use that as our entry to having an organically growing business alongside our inorganically growing business. So we still do M&A, but we also want to win new workplace business, for example. So this has all been going on in the background while I was going through a recruitment process.
Right.
And they knew that they wanted a brand director to kind of come in and kind of work out a couple of things, really. One is, what should our brand strategy be for the group? And also a couple of decisions had been made around the sort of the basic architecture of the group, which was that it was going to be a portfolio of brands.
Right.
Just because we literally just bought all these brands and brought them together, there was no way we were going to be able to transition them over to one single brand anytime soon. So there was always going to be a portfolio. So a key thing was, well, how do we arrange those brands to get maximum value and really achieve our enterprise strategy overall? So when I came in, there was a website manager and a social media manager that had been recruited about 2 or 3 months before I joined, and nothing else.
Goodness.
And so I set about trying to understand the core business strategy, and I think that's the point about brand strategy, is that it's a slave to what I would call the enterprise strategy. So what do we want to achieve as a entity, as a company? What is it that we want to achieve? And then the brand strategy is an enabler of that. So the two have got to be connected, and key to our enterprise strategy, where we want to be a purpose-led organization, because through all these acquisitions we suddenly became an enormous company. We went from 500 people to 6,000 employees. We went to being the largest UK's largest long-term savings and retirement business, with about 300 billion assets under administration. So suddenly we were just this enormous player that had a huge amount of clout if we wanted to use it. And I think the chairman and the CEO very much said, well, there's lots of problems with the pensions industry. We're the biggest by size. We should absolutely lean into that.
Take responsibility for it.
And also I think regulation pushes, I think, a lot of financial services businesses to be quite purpose-led. And so that was a key part of the enterprise strategy, is that we by purpose-led, what I mean is we want to make societal change for the better, and that there's a group of stakeholders that we need to join together, because on the basis that if we are purpose-led, for example, we can, the hypothesis is, we can recruit and retain better people, we can build better products, we can be more efficient, which means we can price better and we can win more business. If we do that, we can make more money, which means that we can invest back in the business and we can keep our shareholders happy. So you kind of get a really circular strategy working that sits behind kind of being purpose-led, with each benefit building off the rest of it. That's the theory, and that's at the heart of our enterprise strategy, is being purpose-led. When I think about the brand strategy, I kind of go, right, well, that's right at the heart of it. There's other bits in our enterprise strategy around growth, around kind of resilience, and around kind of efficiency, which are really important. And so my brand strategy has got to kind of support all of those as well.
Yes.
I can't have a brand model that is inefficient. I can't have. I need a brand model that amplifies our resilience and financial strength to help us grow. And I need to have a brand strategy that supports growth as well as our inorganic growth. Those were kind of really kind of key sort of variables that you start to play with and kind of go, well, I've got all these brands now. It's about 6 of them in the group. How do I arrange them all to maximize the value and support that enterprise strategy?
Bigger than the sum of the parts type of approach.
It's absolutely that.
Yeah.
And of course, what you realize quite quickly is that the only way that's going to work is that the corporate brand needs to be a bit stronger than it is today, because Phoenix isn't a very well-known brand. Even amongst corporate brands, wasn't terribly well known. So you kind of go, well, if Phoenix as the master brand embodies the purpose, embodies what the enterprise is about, and is also the voice that talks to the regulator, the voice that talks to government and kind of key influencers, they need to know who we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so kind of, you know, at that point you kind of go, right, well, then job number one is to sort out what Phoenix, how it turns up, right? What does it look like? How does it sound? You want staff to be proud of it. It needs to feel modern. It needs to, you know, there's a whole bunch of things that you would want that corporate brand to represent so it can be a good parent.
I've heard brand being described as it's what people say about you when you leave the room. Do you ascribe to that definition of brand?
I guess to a degree. I think that's cool if you are a big, well-known brand.
Okay.
The most important thing is being invited into the room.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that is a key role of brand building, is to have that level of salience and recall that they actually say, come and talk to us. And then, you know, once you're there, then you kind of, you know, the taste that you leave behind, the memory, that's equally important. But where Phoenix was when I joined was
not being invited.
It was enormous, but no one knew who we were. And then the kind of the strategy and the narrative wasn't really clear. So the job really kind of in day one was to kind of come in and go, right, well, I need to build a team that can help me do this. And also, you know, so I need to I didn't rebrand Phoenix Group, but I guess I refreshed its identity and transformed it from being this kind of backbook consolidator into being this much more purpose-led and modern company. And then in parallel, we're saying, right, what's the brand strategy overall? How do we arrange our brands? How do we create some linkage between them? Maybe we can come on to that in a bit, and I can talk you through how we did that.
We spoke previously, but when you described part of the refreshment of the Phoenix brand, you talked about developing the sonic branding of Phoenix, and we've never had anyone on the podcast before that's gone through that process. So I wonder if you can elaborate on the creative process of developing a sonic brand and how that may differ from what business as usual is.
So the way I want to answer that is just to kind of go back to the kind of the core design principles that sit behind the whole identity, and then how we take that into a kind of sonic kind of expression, I guess. So at the heart of when we were defining what we wanted Phoenix to be like, we ended up, and you know, if anyone's done any kind of brand refresh or brand development, you end up in these kind of crazy meetings where you talk about a lot of adjectives. So what do you want this business to be?
Yeah.
And at the heart of it, we wanted the business to be expert. We wanted it to be known. We wanted it to be empathetic. By that I mean kind of quite customer focused and approachable. We wanted it to be trusted and dependable, really, really important in financial services, especially if you're running people's pensions, that, you know, you're going to be around for a bit. But we also wanted to be optimistic and progressive. So those were the 6, and so those adjectives were actually what helped us define what our purpose would be, and sit right at the core. It's what I would call the kind of the spirit of the company. And so I use those 6 words as my design principles for everything to do with the brand refresh. So whether that was creating a typeface, or whether it was the design system, the colorways, the way we use graphics, there was always this trade-off between, Are they? Do they make us come across as expert, i.e., simple, clear, easy to understand, empathetic, optimistic, etc. So I just used those, and it was a really great vernacular to have with the design team that we were working with, and as a kind of lens to kind of look at everything,
Yes, yeah.
and avoid, the dread of the kind of flourish, which is what happens in design world a lot. You get a lot of kind of little things that appear because they look nice, and you kind of go, yeah, but does that really help?
They're almost principles to keep you on the straight and narrow, really, aren't they? They're kind
Yeah,
of
they are.
parameters for you to work with it.
They are, and I think, and when you're doing, I mean, I'll come to Sonics in a sec, but when but when you're doing kind of like, straightforward design around kind of color or shape or type, using adjectives like that is really, really, really helpful, and most people can visualize quite quickly what you mean by, you know, um, you know, having a sense of kind of trust and reliability. So, that might mean the way you shape the baseline of your type is that they are all quite solid. I know these are small things, but actually when you add it all up into a system, it really, really makes a big difference. So alongside the kind of 2D stuff, we also did some motion work as well, around how we wanted to kind of rock. We live in such an AV world now. So how do we want our logo to appear? How do we want movement to happen? And that was really interesting, because that was, for me, it was again, it was like a stepping stone into the Sonics, because then you start talking about, well, how do I show kind of being kind of trusted and reliable through movement? So actually you end up going, well, actually it's just got to be really controlled, right? It's got to feel powerful, and it's got to be controlled. So when developing our identity, we've got these kind of three feathers that we use. The name's Phoenix, so the obvious analogy there. And the way the feather shapes move, so almost like a kind of wing flying, is full of control, right? And it's just you're translating those attributes into your kind of design language. So then we took that into Sonics. I mean, I think Sonics are massively important as a kind of distinctive asset, to help kind of as a shortcut cue into, oh, it's that brand.
Is this a Sonic agency you worked with?
Yeah, we worked with an agency called Audity. Actually, they're based out of Germany. But they were brilliant. It was almost like leading somebody in the dark, to be honest with you, because we hadn't done this before at all. And they had a sort of tool which they used where you could kind of, and they were kind of going, is it more like this or is it more like this? And there was like, about 50 different variations that you could kind of go through. And
Wow.
then they kind of came back and said, look, we think you're in these kind of territories. At which point, we went, oh no, it's definitely not that. And we were able to kind of filter stuff down.
Yeah.
And then, as we started to kind of hear examples, which was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
We were able to kind of go to sort of define what we meant by these terms like expert and empathetic
What a
musically.
fascinating process.
It was a fascinating process, and what the really, and then when we started working with the composer, was, he basically we created a soundtrack, and then from the soundtrack you extract bits that you can then use for your sort of mnemonic logo, or for different the soundtrack is about 3 or 4 minutes long, but you'd never really play it. That's not the purpose of it. It's more about, there was 3 separate movements in it.
Yeah.
We created the soundtrack for Phoenix, about the flight of a phoenix. So
Right.
it starts off slowly. It's called Rising, the first movement, and it's all about kind of taking off and getting up, right? And then you get to the kind of crescendo when you're flying at pace, and then there's a kind of landing, where the kind of diminuendo, where you kind of come down at the end. So we had all these different movements, and then with each of those movements, you have different layers that you have. So you have your kind of your base layer. So what's the rhythm? What's the bass? Kind of what's the driving force behind the music? You then have the middle layer, which is effectively the chords that are holding the damn thing together, and then you have the kind of leitmotif, the melody that sits on top. And so each of those have got different roles to play when you're creating something. I mean, it was a fabulous experience to kind of
Wow.
go through.
Forgive me if I got this wrong, but it feels like the output that you end up with is almost a kit of parts that you can utilize in different ways. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I think that's true, because I think where we ended up is we ended up with this kind of core soundtrack, and we said, oh, that's brilliant, that's fine, but now what's the really revved up version of it? and then what's the really pared back version of it.
Yeah.
And then because you've got these three different movements, you've got these different layers happening. You've then got different kind of levels of intensity, and so we built a tool which we could use, and the guys use it internally quite a lot, where they can effectively go, right, we want this bass part from this movement and this level of intensity, and we're going to put this leitmotif on it from over here. So you can effectively create it yourself. That it's a really, really powerful way of being able to hold things together, especially when you're doing a lot of videos and all the rest of it, where you've got kind of soundtracks, to not constantly recreate the sonic, but to actually have something that
It's almost like a variation, is it?
it's a
Or
variation. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a variation. So like the leitmotif holds it together, and also we've got a couple of distinctive elements within the way the soundtrack works,
yeah,
which are very Phoenix. And
yes, yes,
obviously internally, everyone, poor souls, know it now because
yeah.
on every corporate video or whatever that they are exposed to it. But it was a fabulous experience. Really enjoyed doing it, and it's been I think it's very distinctive for us, and it also just projects us a bit beyond a kind of boring life and pensions company.
It's classic Ehrenberg Bass, distinctive asset. It's not an asset that every brand or business has. I don't think there are not that many well-known sonic brands. I'm interested in just in your thoughts on this. Do you think that in order to gain benefits of a sonic brand asset, that you need to be a company of a certain size, or do you think it's actually something that will start being utilized by all sorts of size
Yeah,
organizations?
I don't think it's about size necessarily. I mean, I think you've got to have a very clear design system. You've got to know what it is you're trying to communicate, and I think the relevance comes into the channels that you're using.
Yeah.
So I knew from a corporate brand perspective that my Phoenix Group doesn't really exist in the real world. We don't have products. We don't have offices that people can see in the street. We haven't got shops. So we're very much going to live in the minds of people and through pretty much digital channels these days.
And you previously mentioned the importance of audiovisual
Yeah,
aspect.
and so therefore AV becomes massively important, and your identity becomes massively important because people are going to hear you as much as they're going to see you.
Yes.
And so
Increasingly more so.
yeah, so I thought, you know what, this is probably especially as we've got very low awareness. So I want to build some distinctive assets that can be very consistent and managed over time. And I just, I figured that this was going to be a really good way of doing it. The same with motion actually as well, and kind of how we kind of rock up and appear in animations and in films and our end frames and stuff like that. It's really I think that if you can get a design system working really well, it becomes very distinctive very quickly, and people don't need to see the logo to know that, oh, it's
No,
that
no.
brand.
Fabulous. It's absolutely fascinating to it's yeah, thanks for going through that. It sounds a beautiful process to go for. Really enjoyable. One last question on that. How long approximately is start to end that you went through and that?
Well, the whole rebrand, we started the work in the June, and I launched it in the March.
Okay. Yeah.
So about 9 months.
Yeah.
Um, and we built the Sonics probably over a 3 month period, I would have thought.
How does that then start maneuvering into brand campaigns? And also, how does that, where it's a portfolio of individual brands, how does that also then start filtering down into the brand strategy, into
Yeah.
the individual brands such as Standard Life?
Yeah, big topics. So all right. So Phoenix is the kind of the master brand, right? So we have to embody the purpose, we have to represent it, and therefore to have real impact, we have to do things, right? People remember actions, not words. So very important that we achieve change, and we are seen to be participating in, at times leading the debate around what needs to change. Um, And so from a campaigns perspective, but also for our customer brands as well, being a good parent that is the kind of composite of everything,
Yes.
it's really important that we do things that they can kind of go, we're part of this group that are doing these amazing things. Crudely,
Yeah.
that's quite
That goes
important.
back to the bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in different categories, it's more important than not. So for Standard Life and our workplace business, it was really important that that you know the Standard Life team could say, look, we've been bought by Phoenix. You know, there's this huge company, really, really strong, massively committed to the industry, and they're investing X amount in our business to help us build new propositions, improve our service, all the things that didn't happen when we were part of Standard Life Aberdeen. So it was really important they accept, but that meant we had to demonstrate that we were actually doing that. And that's really where our kind of campaigning came in. And so what underpinned all of that was some proper customer insight though. So we did a whole a program of research amongst all the different stakeholder groups that Phoenix Group, the corporate brand, needed to appeal to. So whether that's the media, key influencers there, or in government and policymakers, in the city, and investors, future talent that we want to recruit into the organisation, kind of key commentators that are just out and about, what we kind of call our engaged public. So we the whole IFA and financial intermediary markets that have a huge impact on our business through our brands.
Was this going to speak directly to all of these different
Yeah,
groups?
there were about 7 different audiences that we wanted to really understand, and I went in with some qualitative first, and then we did some quant, and I wanted to understand a couple of really important things. The first thing is, when they think about a company like Phoenix, that is the largest long-term savings and retirement business in the UK, what do they expect from it? What do they want from that company? What's the most important thing that they want? And then what things could we do that would drive the highest amount of advocacy? So it's almost irrespective of Phoenix, just if you were the biggest and you were facing into that, what would you want them to do and be like? We then did a bit of kind of key driver analysis where we kind of chewed all the results of that up to create a very simple 2x2 that kind of plotted the things that are most important versus the things that drive the most amount of advocacy. And we did that for each of the audiences, and then we crashed it together to kind of create an overarching view. Hugely important piece of work to do because it just shone lights on the things that were massively important to our audiences. And some of them are really obvious. You've got to have good customer service, you've got to have decent pricing, you've got to be accessible, etc. Those things were really important. Don't drive any advocacy though. They're just table stakes. You've just got to be really good at those. So then you ask yourself the question, are we?
Yeah.
And what programs we need to put in place to be better at those. And then on the advocacy side, a lot of the answers, when you look at just what would drive advocacy, they kind of go, oh, you need to advertise, you need to sponsor, and you sit there and go, oh, brilliant, that sounds great. But then you kind of go, but that's not important to people. Right. So the sweet spot is the top right. What drives the most amount of advocacy and what is most important? And there was one answer in there. And the one answer is help people manage their finances through their kind of very long life that they're having. How do they plan for it? What do they do? We just launched a think tank called Phoenix Insights, which was all about longevity and the impact of longer lives on society, and in particular what that meant for the pensions and retirement business. And it's a space that, whilst a lot of competitors cover it, none of them really own it. And we thought, what, that's what we want to do. So that was important for me from a kind of brand building perspective, because if I want to be purposeful, then actually this is a massive issue. I mean, I think there's something like 17 million people adults in the UK, working age adults, are not saving enough for retirement, and certainly won't have enough money to have the kind of retirement that they are hoping to have. I think that's fairly well reported. That's there's only 40 million working age people. So, that's quite a large proportion of the population are going to have a pretty poor longer life. 1 in 3 children born today will live until they're 100. And
Yeah.
I think the actuaries tell me 1 in 4 15-year-olds today will live to be 120. Right. So you want to retire at 60? How much money have you got to have saved?
Yeah.
Or do you want to live on the state pension? Really
For a
difficult.
long time.
Really, really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
we
presuming there is one then.
so this is quite a big issue, and as the largest in the sector, I thought, well, this is the one that we need to absolutely lean into and own.
Okay.
So when it comes to the campaigning, so it's a long story to get to the
Yeah. No.
campaign,
No.
but
I'm
so you
following.
do the work, and you kind of go, right, that is the zone that we need to play in.
Yeah.
It's worth saying as well, actually, net zero did kind of come up as well in terms of, and I'll come on to that in a minute because it's a slightly different audience and there's slightly different expectations around decarbonisation. But longer lives, helping people plan for it and have a better longer life was definitely the zone. Whether you're an advisor, an MP, a journalist, a customer, that was the area that you need to be in. So we started to build out our approach to that and kind of go, well, how do we campaign on this? Right? How do we do this in a way that raises awareness of the issue, but going back to my design attributes, is progressive, is optimistic. We're not going to scare people into saving more money. That isn't going to happen. They're not engaged in the category anyway. And Project Fear certainly won't help. So how do we find ways of engaging people in the fact that they're probably going to live longer? So certainly generationally, people are living longer, and that they probably haven't made enough provision in their working lives for that life that they want to have in the future. So Phoenix Insights, our think tank that we'd set up just after I joined, had started to do quite a lot of research into this area, and a lot of message testing actually as well, to kind of work out how do you engage people in something they're really not interested in, and how do you do it in a way that inspires them rather than terrifies them. And so we started to kind of build out a communications program, which we've executed over the last couple of years. And I suppose the bit about so the works in parallel to this is so my view is that we will grow our reputation and our brand strength through talking about these issues and campaigning on effectively our purpose. Now that's not every brand can do that. A corporate brand certainly can. It's quite important, certainly in the B2B space and in other categories, to be seen as being quite purposeful, values-led, good people I want to do business with. Much more important in some categories than others. But it really, really works for us because it allows us to demonstrate what we're doing, the impact that we're making, which then should strengthen people's trust in us and advocacy of us and the kind of things that you want from your kind of brand KPIs. After rebranding the business, so in 2022, we launched our first campaign, largely to our kind of more specialist audiences, which was it's called Let's Get Ready. That was the internal name for it, and that was just all about talking about how people aren't ready to retire, and actually retirement isn't really ready for them either, because nothing's set up properly. They're not engaged in it. That was really that worked really well. It certainly helped put us on the radar with a lot of the audiences that we wanted to. But then in 2023, we said, right, well, that was great, but what we really need to do is kind of go out to a much broader audience now. We've kind of done some testing effectively. We want to go to a broader audience. And we think we need to start having what we've kind of rather cliched called having a national conversation. We want to spark off a conversation that gets people thinking about and talking about the back end of their lives, and if they're going to live longer, what do they need to do about it? It's not a campaign to make people save more money into their pension immediately. That won't work. It's more about recognizing that we've all got our own individual agency.
Yeah. Let's stop avoiding it.
And there are points of time in our lives where we can make decisions that can affect the rest of our lives. And and especially in a cost of living crisis, and and food inflation is still 8%. I mean, it is really hard for people to save more money. And also the amounts of money they'd have to save if they haven't saved enough are so enormous that it's unrealistic to expect them to be able to do it. So what's Phoenix doing about it? Well, we're lobbying really hard on auto enrollment and trying to kind of get contributions changed and the rules around that changed, so more people kind of can benefit from that. And we're lobbying very hard around state pension, but also what to more to kind of savers and the man in the street is to kind of go, look, you may well be working for longer. So actually, there's some interesting things which you can do around switching careers, retraining, and just thinking about that.
I've read a great book about that, about people's second career.
Yeah.
And it's all about a book about was, human life expectancy going to 100. Suddenly the idea of actually going into your second career at 60 as opposed to retiring is fabulously exciting.
And the truth is, it sort of happens already. It's not celebrated.
Right.
It's not championed. Very few people reach 65 or 67 and retire. Most people wind down. They'll do something part-time. They'll find ways of still earning a bit of cash. And when you start scratching the surface and asking people, that's exactly what you find, that they have second careers. They do different things.
Surely a key audience for you, though, is the young generation, because if they started earlier, then everyone gets the benefit of compounding much quicker, don't they? So is that a priority for Phoenix?
I think at the moment we've looked at kind of Gen X, so broadly speaking, 40-ish to kind of 60-ish. There's an awful lot of undersaving that's happened in that audience, and they've got very limited time to make a difference. I think where we can have more impact with the younger generations is actually around auto enrollment and kind of contributions, so that you're right, if they save more for longer, it will have a compound effect.
But we've got a bigger tidal wave problem that's going to hit
in the next
nearer.
20 years.
Got it. Yeah.
Which I think is what we're really kind of leaning into at the moment.
That makes sense.
And I think, the other bit I said earlier that I mentioned a little bit about kind of decarbonisation and net zero. So the other really, so to solve the pension savings crisis, you need to have a broad awareness and get people kind of engaged in that. Damn, I need to do something about this. It's my life. I've got to work out what I'm going to do. Potentially kind of good work, better work, staying in work for a bit longer, so you either retire later or are able to save a bit more or save for longer. Really important. The other bit that's really important is that the returns on your savings are really good, and that's where decarbonisation comes in as well. And so the way we've approached net zero, and bear in mind we are the largest asset owner in the UK. I think the total assets that we own in the UK represent 5% of the total carbon load in the UK annually. So when we say we're going to reach net zero, that's 5% of the UK's total emissions. That is massive. So we are pushing very hard, and we've got we published our transition plan last year. We've got a very clear plan as to how we're doing that in stages. I think by 2030 we will have 50% reduction. So that's 2.5% of the UK's total carbon emissions. But the point around decarbonisation is it's not just about saving the world. It's also, we have a huge fiduciary responsibility, but we also see risk in not decarbonising in a slowly heating world. And we think there are tons of opportunities to make great investments that will deliver brilliant returns in a sustainable way for our savers. So that's the other bit of this kind of jigsaw. Yes. Is making sure that in the real guts of the organization, in that kind of asset management side, when we're looking after people's pension funds, that we're doing it in a way that is both responsible, but also make sure they get the best returns that we can for them. So that's really important part of the kind of overall equation as well. And that's a lot of the conversations we have with government. The influence we want to have is around creating the right frameworks for us to be able to do that as well. That's part of a huge part of the kind of advocacy work that we do as well.
They're both enormous purpose-led missions, aren't they? And weaving them together, and then I guess the last part of the jigsaw is how they then weave down into the individual brands. And you mentioned to me before about your concept of Well, I'll let you describe it. You know exactly what I'm going to say.
So when we looked at the brand strategy, and there's broadly speaking, there's sort of four brand architecture options that you can have. And I mean, there's variations, but there's four kind of key archetypes that you can have. You can either have a kind of monolithic brand architecture. I worked at Rawmel. That was it. I mean, it did have Parcel Force, which was quite small, but it was predominantly one great big brand. So you either go monolithic, you kind of have a kind of sub brand architecture, a bit like Virgin is probably a good way of doing that. So lots of franchises that all are Virgin Trains, Virgin Money, Virgin this, Virgin that. You can have an endorser brand strategy where you have kind of, here is this individual customer brand, but it is part of this bigger group. Or you can have a kind of prolific strategy, which you tend to get in FMCG, where you have hundreds of brands, but they're not connected together at all. When we looked at our brand strategy and our enterprise strategy, and go, right, what are we going to do here? In an endorsed brand strategy felt like the right thing for us to do. We weren't going to transition everything over to Standard Life and rebrand as that, or rebrand everything as Phoenix. That didn't seem that was desirable. It was also very, 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 very expensive, and would take an exceedingly long time to do it.
Yes, yeah.
Could work out the costs, but working out the benefits was really quite hard, actually. And we didn't want to be at the other end of the spectrum. We didn't want to have a whole series of independent brands, because we wanted to have a single employer brand, so everyone knew who they worked for, that was purpose-led and was doing brilliant things. We thought that was much more important than having individual brands that recruited to them with different terms and conditions and stuff like that, which is much more efficient and effective to kind of do it under one brand. And also, there's 12 million customers within Phoenix Group across all of our brands, and a degree of connectivity between them effectively gives us customer access so that we can cross-sell.
Yeah.
So an endorsed brand strategy is really there to kind of have that kind of connective tissue between the brands, so you're able to introduce brands to each other, which we thought was much more sensible than having everything completely independent and then trying to work out how on earth we're going to cross-sell, given that we had all these customers already.
Enormous commercial benefits, but also tying into the benefits from the purpose-driven objectives of the business as well.
So once we landed on, we're going to have this endorsed brand strategy. So it's going to be Standard Life, part of Phoenix Group, Sun Life, part of Phoenix Group, and the same for Reassure, the same for Phoenix Life. Just having a kind of a line under a logo, has fairly weak effects. That's not going to be enough. There needs to be much more of the kind of master brand infusing itself into those brands. So we came up with the concept of the kind of the brand tuning fork. So you have at the bottom, you have Phoenix, and that has, and that represents the kind of the spirit and the purpose and the values of the organization. And you move up that tuning fork into the different brands. They take those bits of DNA and they translate them into their market. And sometimes brands get this wrong. I think Unilever have been criticised for getting this wrong with purpose-led mayonnaise. I don't need Standard Life to kind of position itself in the same way that Phoenix Group is, but I do need it to be resonant with what it is that we're doing. I want to give them the flexibility so that they can win in their market, but that there is a golden thread between how they behave, how they show up, how they the propositions, the service quality that links back to our central purpose as an organization. The same for Sun Life, which is in the protection market, quite different.
I may have got this wrong, forgive me if I have, but the 6 elements that you used in the original branding
the attributes.
the attributes which were guiding you, are these the sort of how those attributes is how each individual brand should also fit into those?
But they'll mean slightly different things for them depending on the market that they're servicing.
Yeah, makes complete sense.
So they're not sub-brands, right? I want them to have the flexibility to be able to win in their market and be able to kind of, pivot the way they need to. But there are a set of ground rules around kind of, because we are a purpose-led organization with these values and these attributes. And so that's really important that gets embedded in their propositions, in their positioning, and when you add it all up and you line all the brands next door to them, you kind of go, yeah, this is coherent now. This kind of works. And also what we start to do through that program is introduce our family of brands. So that we can introduce Standard Life to Phoenix Life or Reassure customers through our kind of CRM programs and all the rest of it. And that's again really important commercially that we're able to do that. But each of those brands can leverage where it's valuable to them, what the master brand is doing around purpose or around sustainability and kind of climate change. It's not mandatory. If it's not valuable to them, don't leverage it. But if it is, if it really helps you, so say in a B2B environment, for Standard Life, where they know they're going to be selling to, I don't know, master trusts and trustees and through employee benefit consultants. If it's important to them for prospects that are kind of horizon scanning and just thinking about change, it's probably important that Phoenix turns up where those people are getting their information and talks about the things that we're doing to kind of really improve the industry and kind of our financial strength and all those bits. That's probably quite important, so that when they go, oh yeah, Standard Life's part of them, oh, we'll have them on
Yes.
the
Yeah.
pitch list. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Get it.
There's real value to be had in
Mm.
that, which Standard Life is not a PLC. It wouldn't be able to do that on its own. But it's important that the corporate brand turns up in those places in a complementary way.
Mm-mm-mm. Fascinating. I feel like we've been given an absolute masterclass in brand strategy. And just to wrap us up, I want to just jump out slightly wider, if I may, into marketing more broadly, and then bring it back again to the audience that tunes into the podcast. So I'm keen to get, you've had a fascinating career from multitude of agencies, working with some of the largest brands in the world in financial services. I wonder if you can reflect back on your career with the aim of looking forward to see how you see the role of marketing in general evolving within financial services marketing industry.
I think one of my biggest observations is that marketing a service is very different from selling a product. And I think sometimes FS marketeers forget that. It's very easy to fall into the vernacular of what a FMCG brand would do. But actually every experience, the things that we are doing are really important, because none of our products are particularly tangible. They're intangible. So the service experience, the journeys, the touch points, massively important to kind of reinforce what your brand is and how it's perceived. I think that's sometimes underestimated, but the best sort of financial services marketers absolutely get that. That is really important, because it means you've got much more of a kind of sort of, I don't know, surround sound to the brand work that you're doing. It's really about an experience, much more than it is just an ad or an app or a single customer journey. It's everything.
The entirety, yeah.
It's the whole way you show up.
Mm-mm.
And that makes it hard, because you have to be able to draw a line and say, well, there's only so much I can focus on to actually make a difference. So I think that ability to prioritize the highest value touch points and going, right, what is the experience there and how do I make it positive and memorable, is really important. And I think but this isn't a criticism of FS actually, because I think this is true for lots of other categories. We do tend to get quite product focused and not think about the overall brand experience that we want to have, because we're desperate to talk about this new product that somebody can buy that will do X, Y, and Z. That of course is important at a part of the sales cycle. It's probably not the most important thing to draw people in, though, unless they're ready to buy right now.
We talked about this initially when we were talking about the benefits ladder, and you have a kind of feature benefits and product benefits and then emotional benefits at the top. And if you can get closer to the emotional benefits, then I guess that's more the experience that you're referring to.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there was a lovely example actually. I mean, this is years ago now. I remember NatWest. They ran an ad on this actually, but they had brilliant service, which actually probably most banks do, but NatWest were the only ones to talk about it at the time, which is if you lose your bank card, you can phone up and they'll give you a one-time only code and you can go to a cash machine, you can get some money out.
Right. Very
Right.
useful.
And you think, God, that's really useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that. That's probably about 15 years old now. I remember that much more than I remember anything about product marketing that they've told about, because it's something, it's like a I don't know, a digital proposition.
Yeah.
It's
But you
it's
stored it and thought, I may need that someday.
and
So
it's just it's really powerful. Now, will
yeah.
that make me change my bank account? No idea. Haven't really thought about it. But the fact is, I can recall it
Yeah.
at a moment's notice. I can't recall anything else. I think our ability to identify and invest in experiences like that is increasingly important in a world where, frankly, all the products and the services are pretty much the same anyway. So that ability to differentiate is important. And I guess, I mean, the one thing I learned at MasterCard, which has stayed with me massively, is that at MasterCard we couldn't differentiate, right? The whole point of our of our product was it was the same as Visa and the same as American Express. You know, there's actually global rules that say it has to be the same, otherwise people are going to get very confused when they go to a point of purchase and they don't know what to do. So when you work in a world where there is no product differentiation, how do you differentiate? Well, you've got to come up with a personality, you've got to come up with an expression, you've got to come up with a bit of emotional connection, and you're going to have to really own that and reinforce it. Obviously, you know, the guys at MasterCard, you know, have absolutely done that, and they've actually turned prices into product propositions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's phenomenal what they've done the last 15.
I mean, price has become part of culture, really, hasn't it?
It's huge, but when I worked on it, it was just an advertising campaign, which we then also activated through sponsorship. So you create priceless experiences. So whether that's player mascots for, you know, kids at, you know, Champions League finals, or you know, VIP areas for customers at the Brit Awards, or whatever. But they've taken it into such, I mean, they've got like priceless restaurants now, I think, in New York. And you know, the thing they did, that amazing initiative around kind of true name. I mean, just think about that from a kind of identity and fraud protection basis, to create a payment vehicle if you are transgender, so that you can have your true name on your card, but actually relates to a different identity and bank account. I mean, just get your head around that. It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, it's a, you know, a brilliant thing to have done, and truly priceless for those people. But just the amount of hard work they must have gone into doing that around kind of identity verification and security and all the rest of it must be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just I think, I mean, they are a bit of an outlier in terms of how they've done that. But I think the point is that you have to find points of distinctiveness, and so that you can really, you know, when you can't differentiate from a product perspective, that you can be remembered and recalled and salient in that moment. And I think there's a lot of work to do there. You know, there's a lot of work to do there. It's not just true of financial services, but I think in a services world where you haven't got a product on a shelf, and increasingly there aren't places on the high street that you can go, you just lives in a digital world. There's a huge amount that has to be done there.
Thank you so much for giving and sharing some of your wisdom built up over the years. I mean, that is an absolute masterclass in brand. So yeah, very, very grateful. I've learned an enormous amount, and I'm sure everyone listening or watching will have done as well. So thank you for being so generous.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you for listening today to The Growth Engine. If you enjoyed this episode and like to hear more, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates, or on hubagency.co.uk. Thank you, and see you next time.